you were in a position to actually stay in the league.
Yes, we were. So guys that run the East Berkshire League have been getting a monthly email from me, basically saying where we're at. We're the UK's first fantasy football team. The Hype Train brand started as a passion project on mine and Sam's. The Thames Valley League is a league that we have, I'll open in a minute, we've applied to it, I think, every single year.
Welcome back, everybody, and welcome back to a Ultimate 11 podcast. Here today with a special guest of ours, Rob Austin from the Hype Train. I've known Rob now for probably coming to 4 years nearly, and when I first met Rob, I was on the committee meeting. He walked in with his to do the committee interview, and I've got to say, my mouth was open from minute one. Because the guy came in with a business plan, which no one's ever seen before at a committee meeting there, outlining what they wanted to do. And they told them about the video camera that they were going to have and what they wanted to do, how they're going to want to improve Saturday football. When I say improve, it's nothing big-headed about that. They want to kind of update what we were doing on Saturdays, and to be quite honest, I've always been a fan of these guys, in both playing and also from afar watching their video footage, and also their other bits on social media you do with your other websites and bits and pieces. I know you're a massive football fan, completely. We can go into a bit more into that in a minute, but yeah, let's actually start with a bit about yourself, Rob. I mean, obviously you started Hype Train, but Hype Train was something different before that.
Yeah, so we're the UK's first fantasy football team. The Hype Train brand started as a passion project on mine and Sam's. We started the team when we were 28 years old, and basically in our mid-20s, we kind of had like no direction. We weren't doing anything with our lives, and we were kind of stagnating in our 20s. So we kind of said we have to change it. So we started with a website, and we kind of had a long-term vision that we wanted to get more people involved. We wanted to build and develop our writing skills, our graphic design skills, creating content on YouTube, across social platforms. So we kind of got to that point, and then we kind of maxed out on what we had achieved and what we wanted to do in that realm. We got a nice little followership on Twitter, and we kind of got about enough, and we kind of hit a limit where we said we want more. So we got to the point where I was like, the main reason why we started the football team was because we just wanted more. We wanted more people involved, we wanted more interactions. We wanted it to be so different. And the idea of becoming the first fantasy football website that had an actual football team was just, as soon as I had it in my head, I couldn't get it out, and it just happened overnight. So yeah, it's kind of a little bit about how the team started, and then from there, it's just grown year on year. Fortunately, I actually had a football background from playing. I played for Woodley United for 5-6 years. I was part of multiple of their teams and setups, and I had a lot of friends in that team. So the kind of core premise of the core players from our team come over from them. We had a really good year. We were about to win the league, and the team kind of messed us about a little bit. So we kind of said, okay, now is the time to pull the trigger. So yeah, we kind of stepped away and formed our own thing. And since then, we've gone through a lot of iterations of the team, and it's just pretty much been my life since. It's been a very hands-on project, 40 hours a week. It's another job for me, in and out. So yeah, football is pretty much my life when it comes to that. So yeah, but it's been a progression. Like, I wasn't just happy writing online on a blog all the time. I kind of hit it in my head. I'm 27 and I need to play more. So as soon as I surrounded myself with the right people that were interested in doing the same thing, I just couldn't get out of my head.
Now, you mentioned Sam, and obviously for people who don't know that Sam is your brother, twin brother, who is often seen on the sidelines with the camera in hand, taking some of the fantastic shots that you guys do as a gallery every week. What actually is Sam's involvement? Because he is very much a background man on this.
He is. He's almost like a silent partner. In fact, I don't think the club would be what it is without him. He does all of the footage, all the photography. He organises a lot on the side. He's the guy that takes all the pressure off of me on games. I've got a small little committee of players that help me and Sam run the club, and they do such a wonderful job of giving us advice. But without Sam, I don't know how I would function, because I think I needed somebody else with the size of the club that I wanted to have literally an identical carbon copy of me, so literally do everything that I couldn't. So behind the scenes, Sam is the club chairman. He's involved he does all of the club's finances. He's more of a business-minded person than I am. I'm more of a big picture guy, and then Sam's the guy that says, "Hold on a minute, this is what we can do." Sorry. So yeah, he's the guy that will turn up to the games and do photography. He's the guy that sets up all the video cameras. He's the guy that gets all of the photos for our social media. He's the guy that helps organise everything in the background. I know that I'm more of the face of it because I'm the guy that's on the camera every week, but Sam is equally or more important to the brand than what I am, because he's the guy that goes out and actually does it. He's the guy that actually captures everything, and people like betting grassroots football are a dime a dozen. They do not come about, and Sam has just as much, if not more, passion for the team than I do. It just comes out in different ways, and everything that you see on about the team is because of Sam's hard work, and then I just piece it all together.
Yeah, I was thinking of Sam's passion. He's been sent off on the sideline.
Yeah, he has. Yeah, he got sent up against Ivy Heath for having a go at Ricky because he got the flag. Yeah,
no, I know he does get passionate too, and yeah, well done Sam for all your hard work, mate. I know that you do a lot for the club there. You mentioned something which is quite interesting just a minute ago. You talk as a hype train as a brand. I mean, obviously, we're Stoke Poges Football Club, but also we run on a separate part of it. It's Ultimate 11, which is where this podcast is coming from, where Stoke Poges put their matches onto. So we kind of got two things going, which is sometimes a little bit confusing, but obviously you decided to come in on a slightly different angle to what we did, actually just brand it all as Ultimate, as Hype Train. And you talk about the brand Hype Train a lot, in fairness, not a football club. So yeah, tell me about that, why you do that.
I feel like football clubs aren't football clubs. I have a little different view on football. Than I think I see football in a different way. I don't look at it as playing football. I know it sounds weird, but I don't. I look at other stuff first. I look at branding. I look at stuff online first. I look at match programs. I look at social media graphics. I look at interviews. I look at what setups teams have. Like, for example, you have such a lovely setup here for the podcast that I'll come away from and probably go home to Sam and say, okay, they've got this, and this. It's more, I think at football, first of all, to get it right and to be a sustainable club, you have to think about this stuff before you kick football. So with us, we already had a brand. I wasn't sure of the name when we first started the team because I thought, oh my God, nobody's going to want to play for a team called Hype Train. Little did I know, it's actually quite a unique selling point. It's nobody else has our name, nobody else has our branding, nobody else does what we do. And it's actually turned out to be nothing but positive. Nobody, well, apart from like the occasional opponent that gives us a bit of a ribbing, we never have people complain about the identity and the name. What they care about is the setup, the organisation, and just the professionalism. They look at that and they're attracted to that, and that way you find a better class of player. They might not be the best players, but you find people with the correct mindsets that the brand needs. And with football, for me, playing football is 90 minutes, 180 minutes a weekend. But aside from that, you do a lot more for the brand when you're not kicking a ball. For example, YouTube videos take 6 to 8 hours to edit. Photo galleries, as a lot of photographers know that might watch this, it's not a 5-minute job of sticking it on a computer. You have to do a lot of editing, a lot of trimming down. And with anything you do, whenever I update our club website, I update every player profile manually every single week with their appearances, their stats. It's not a 5-minute job. I feel like you've got to cater to the business or the brand ahead of the actual football first. Otherwise, the clubs fall away. And that's what you see a lot in the East Berks League. You see it in Thames Valley. You see it at any level of Sunday League football. Clubs that aren't built, sorry, clubs that aren't built to last don't last. So you have to think with a forward, progressive mindset before you even kick the ball.
Now, obviously, a couple of years ago, I first met you, and you come in with your business plan and handed it out to everyone, and it's quite an impressive document that you've done. And you're now, 4 years into that plan. Having owned businesses and such like myself, I know a business plan really lasts about 30 seconds. How have things changed for you since that first time you walked through the door in the committee? What's happened? Obviously, you've added teams and such like, just talk a bit about that.
Yeah, so when we had a business plan in mind 5 years ago, pretty much, when I started the team about 5 years ago, I even made the social media accounts about 2 years before we even kicked the ball, because I was so sure what we were going to do. I feel the difference is what you learn from other people. I had played a lot of grassroots football, but I'd never been behind the scenes. I'd never experienced football from the other side. And so I've learned a lot from people like yourself and other chairmen and other secretaries that I speak to. You learn. And I think the difference is that you, over time, when you have a lot of experience from the other side of it and you kind of see it, there's a few things that just you do not let go and you just learn from and you build on year on year on year, because you find out what habits do constantly work, what doesn't, where you need to refresh. And yeah, I feel like learning and experience has changed the way that I've done it. On top of that, the people you're involved with as well. And largely the club has been run predominantly by me and Sam, but you have people that come into your life that make your club better, that make it worse, that cause issues, that cause strife, but equally cause you joy, and to the point where you can win a trophy. And in 3 or 4 years we've had it all. We've had people that have caused the team nothing but strife, nothing but pain, nothing but heartbreak. But then you've got people that come in that make the club so much more than what you thought it was going to be, and they have as much passion and as much care and as much detail. Like Captain Vince, for example, comes in. He's he's in a different type of world. He earns a lot more money. He's very smart, and he comes in with some fresh ideas that make you tinker a little bit about what you want in a positive way. So he comes in and says, I like your 5-year plan, but here's how you make it better. Here's how you make this better. Here's how you make yourself better. So when you slowly meet people that improve you as a human being and they push you to be better when it comes to running a football club, that's kind of where the little tinkers lie with what you want to run as a club. And that's kind of how I've developed my strategy. We have since then we've got an amazing deck of business plan, sponsorship plan, everything that we're rolling out at the moment. So, and all of that is purely from experience. You learn a lot. When I started the club, I thought we weren't going to have teething pains. We weren't going to have issues with players. And then slowly but surely you figure out that you have every issue under the sun. You can't help it. It's unavoidable. But you're in a mindset where you think, it's not going to happen to me. I know better. And then it happens and you think, oh God, I should have listened to myself. And all football club owners will sympathise and empathise with this, that you think one thing, another thing happens, and then you recover from it and you learn from it. And that's the parcel of football. That's what you learn at this level. And the players and the people that stick around in grassroots football end up better, and they usually end up learning and growing and developing. And yeah, it's a whole cycle that you learn. So now we're in a position where I feel like in the next couple of years, we did expand the Sunday team. At the moment, it's the only team we have. And it's got to the point now where we're thinking about bigger picture stuff. We want to add a women's team, we want to add youth sections, we want to create partnerships with universities and local colleges in the area to attract constant players that go into all of our setups. And you don't do that without having the right advice and the right people and the right motives in the area. And Reading on the whole is a very interesting area for football. I feel like there's only 2 teams in the area that have a big pool. There's Reading City FC, who are based out of Scowers Lane. They've got a big setup, and then there's Woodley United. Woodley United have all the pitch contracts with the universities. Reading City have contracts everywhere. They're the 2 behemoths in the area. But apart from that, there's nothing. There is such a big void to fill. and we kind of want to step into that void and, you know, become one of those teams that, not in the same image, but we want to have our own thing going on where there's an alternative. Because we're talking here about 2 Hellenic and above level teams, like Thames Valley Prem teams, that do not offer grassroots football largely. The Reading City team do, and they have a lot of development teams, but for the average Joe of the world, there's not a lot of teams that you can go to in Reading on a Saturday. There's not a lot of development unless you want to be part of Woodley, and as every player knows, clubs are not perfect. You know, if there's only 1 or 2 big teams and you're not in the mindset to play for either of them, it can put your training together. So we're in a mindset where we want to become an alternative and an attractive prospect to join instead of something that you think of as a slog on a week-to-week basis.
So I want to come to the thing that we want to talk about in a minute. But before I do that, obviously you mentioned a minute ago you started the Sunday side. Obviously, back on the back of the success at that point in time from the Saturdays, and obviously we want to expand it into that. How has that gone so far? Obviously, your second season now?
Yes, technically it's our second season. We formed our Sunday squad from the same players we had on Saturdays, and when COVID happened, there was its second lockdown in 2020, and the Reading Sunday League basically shut all the doors for football, even though they had kind of like all the restrictions were kind of fading. So myself, Paul Guttridge, Richard Caversham, and Ian Pulver at Woodley Saints, we all kind of got together. We formed the Reading Sunday Social League. It was a league of our own design and creation. We basically had 8 teams playing football just to get football played, because, you know, we saw that there was every referee available, every pitch was available. So we kind of said, let's give some of the lads some football for the summer. And we actually got to the final against Woodley in that. We lost, but it was a great learning curve so that we could then win the President's Cup in the following summer. And yeah, we just kind of, so we had a very good experience and the players seemed to enjoy it. And last year when we started, we were put into the Division 4, right in the basement. I actually went higher, they said no. And we had a very, very productive season. Though largely because of the level we were at, players were quite uncomfortable playing at that level because we were slightly better than the Div 4 teams and we wanted to play at a high level. And it was a very interesting season because it was we had one group of players and we were basically hoping that they were going to spread themselves out across both days. And what we actually found was that 7/10 of people were in for Sunday because Sunday is quite a convenient time to play football. And then you would get the same hardcore bunch that were there for Saturdays each week. And every week on Saturdays was 11 or 12 players. I think pretty much until the club semi-final, we were pretty much scraping for players every week. In the group we were grovelling and begging players to come and commit on the better Saturday games that we had going. Now we're in the 3rd season of our Sunday league. We're pretty much established in that division now. Local games are obviously a benefit to some of our players. So yeah, it's been a positive experience. Hopefully we can, fingers crossed, win something this year.
So it's been positive so far and hopefully it may continue. Mm-hmm. Okay, right. Let's talk about Saturday football. So, a few years back, 2017 I think, or was it 18? You come into the league? 2019, yeah. Right. As soon as that, okay. So 2019 you entered a team in the league. I think in the Division 3 at the time?
It was Division 2, so there was the Premier Division, Division 1 and Division 2.
Okay.
And we were in Division 2 with Townmead, Old Windsor Reserves, Berks, your reserve team, Barton Rovers, and a few of the old Langley teams that folded as well. So yeah, it was a strong 10-team division. So there was a strong 10-team division and we finished, I think we only played 4 league games and then COVID happened. We got to the quarterfinals of the Berks and Bucks Junior Cup, which was the secondary cup competition. Now we've only got the Charles Trophy, and that's for pretty much the only teams that get into the finals there are the teams up in the Thames Valley Prem. I feel like the Berks and Bucks are missing a trick of having that secondary competition. I feel like without it, there's no hope for little clubs that have just been promoted. At the moment, you're only looking at teams like Finch Hampstead, The South Bucks team got to the final last year. It's that kind of level that you need to be at. Otherwise, you're thinking, God, I just want to get these games out of the way. Like we played Raysbury away from home, and that's what we got knocked out by. We had a very, very good game against them, but we just parked 2 bands of 5 because that's what we could do. And so there's very good level. So we would have been better placed in the Junior Cup in that competition. I feel like, I'm going to plead to Alistair and the team at the Berks and Bucks that had a junior trophy next year for the competition for sure. So yeah, then COVID happened, and obviously there was that long pause, and the season then come back for the 2020-21 season, and we were in Division 1 again with yourselves. There was a 17, there was like 3 or 4 divisions of 17s, weren't there? And I think we only played about 8 or 9 other games in that division because of COVID again. We just couldn't get the players to commit because when they knew the games weren't going to happen, and it just kind of fizzled out. The season fizzled out. Western Hambledon were at the bottom of the table. And yeah, it just was not an enjoyable year. And we kind of lost a lot of players at the end of that season because of COVID. We just had no momentum. It was just the whole thing had stagnated. The whole thing. So I think in 2 years. We had played maybe 13 league games. I don't even think that, maybe 10 or 12 league games at most. And then it led to us being promoted to the Premier Division. So,
before we go any further, right, I want to go into,
of course,
the differences between Saturday and Sundays, because you highlighted 2 things there that you've been promoted after playing a very minimal amount of games as such. You're looking for your second promotion in 3 years.
Yeah.
After coming second bottom.
We only got 1 game as well.
We'll go into that in a second. Obviously, you play on Sundays now, and you've played Saturdays until recently. We'll go for all that in a minute.
At the Electric Garden, we offer you an experience like no other, with something different happening every day. If you think you got a little bit of a singing voice, come down on Karaoke Tuesdays. We provide the microphone, and you provide the good vibes. Wednesdays, we get all experimental with the food, and we've linked up with Club My Life to bring you Wing Wednesdays. This is where you can try new and experimental wings that's not even on the menu yet. Thursdays, we go live with local singers, performers and bands coming through to entertain you for the evening. Once we hit the weekend, things get extra lively. Fridays, we bring you night vibes. R&B, hip-hop, house, garage and everything in between. On Saturdays, we bring you lift. Nothing but uplifting, high-voltage electric energy. Excuse the pun. Whether you're just passing for a taste of the best fried chicken in Berkshire, daytime drinks in the sun trap, or for some unique weekend vibes, we've got you covered. But remember, the Electric Garden's only a pub, but it's quite possibly the best pub on the planet.
What do you think the differences are from Saturday to Sundays nowadays?
Okay.
Why are you being successful on a Saturday? Sorry, Sunday.
I feel like it's a twofold answer. The first and most simple answer is that it's a more accessible time for people to play. When you have adults that get near to 30 years old, a lot of my team last year were either university graduates on a placement scheme, or they were around my age, around the 30 mark, where sometimes the 2 p.m. kickoffs on Saturdays were quite inconvenient if they had any form of life. If they had a social life, if they had anything going on, if they had a girlfriend, if they had anything. The types of guys that we have on Saturdays largely just look forward to playing football at the weekends. You have to be a very committed person to play football on Saturdays, and then to do it again on the Sundays as well. Sunday football is accessible, it's more local, so I feel like players don't feel like it's going to intrude on their lives too much. Players, especially since COVID, and I've brought it up a lot, but it's true, players largely want to spend a lot of time with their families and their friends, and football teams largely struggle. What I find is that with Saturday players, you need the right mentality. You need to be able to accept that you're going to be in a more competitive game. You're going to be in a league where you need to dedicate your whole day to it because you don't finish until 4 o'clock. You have to be in one place all the time. And I feel like Saturday teams that don't have committed players tend to find a little bit of strife between the lads because obviously you need committed players. On Sundays, like for example, we had a group of 35 players last year. One Sunday we had 30 players available. On Saturday we had 6. So we had a lot of grievances internally from the management point of view, trying to even bunch out, try to get Saturday games going ahead. But you can't change player habits, and I feel like player habits is I think player habits is the answer. I feel like there's a few answers. Saturday football, you have to be organised, you have to be committed, but you also have to understand player habits and what the players want as well. If the players do not want to play Saturday football, you cannot force them to. And if they want to play Sundays, you have to lean into that. And we got to a position, especially this summer, with our recruitment. We lost a lot of players over the summer. We kind of anticipated it when we won the cup. We had a lot of graduates that were lovely guys, even better football players. They left because obviously they had to go back to the unis. We then had other turnover as well. So we were in a position where we knew it was going to be trouble, even more so this year. So I feel like on the Sunday front, I never had to worry about that because you know you're going to get players available. You know that you're going to get a team out. And I feel like it's a mindset. It's player habits. It's a mindset.
So obviously the mindset on Saturday sounds not easier as such, but it sounds like players are more accessible on Sundays than on Saturdays.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're in 2020-21 season. You've just finishing that off as such, and we're coming 21-22 season. You're in the AGM and you finish second bottom of the league the year before, and then you'll get the nice surprise of, oh, guess what? You've been promoted to the Premier League.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know what went on as such, because I was in committee meetings and such like myself on that for a different reason. But let's have a quick chat about what actually happened there and why a team set bottom of the league suddenly gets promoted into the Prem.
So basically, the EBFL did communicate to the clubs that they planned on, after the COVID year, where there was 2 teams of 7, they were going to merge the 2 divisions and have one greater Premier Division. So we were pretty much told that regardless of what was going to happen in our divisions and our seasons, that we were going to be in the Premier Division. And what I lobbied for was the fact that we had barely played any football. We still weren't completely accustomed to the league. We hadn't played many of the teams, and all of a sudden, with a largely new base of player, we were looking at going into a Premier Division, and we didn't know how we were going to manage it. We've never been at that level. We were never comfortable because we hadn't had that development structure in place. We were just snowballed into the Premier Division really without any justification. And what I think the frustrations lied at my club were is that we saw that other clubs in the league structure, the EBFL, because they had a history with the league, were given the preferential treatment of, oh, we know you, we know your qualities, so we're going to give you the benefit of the doubt and keep you in Division 1 so you can develop. And we were never, ever once considered for that. We were never given that opportunity to develop.
I want you to be controversial. Who are those teams?
So there was Ian Wick. Ian Wick were in the Premier Division as well, because they were in the division. And they basically said, we don't have a team strong enough to compete in the Prem. And overnight, without there even being a conversation as to what should happen with them, they were put in Division 1 without so much so as a conversation. And then there was a few other teams that ended up leaving, like St. Peter's Ivor, who were in the Premier Division, probably against the better judgment of every team in the league. We knew they were going to struggle. And then they were being beat 6-7-0 every week, and then by Christmas we've had enough. I can't remember some of the teams. I remember Ian Wick. I don't mean to hark on Colin because he's a really nice lad, but they were given preferential treatment because of their status in the league, because they've got that rapport with the committee members. They were given the benefit of the doubt. But when I said it, we were basically ignored and said, get on with it. And it's because of what we have. We have the best setup. We have an amazing... clubs in the Premier Division were desperate for players. They wanted the video clips, they wanted players, they wanted the photography. And other clubs in the Premier Division were lobbying for us because we had a professional setup. And what I basically told to the league was that we were a bit behind on the playing front. We were having a largely new group of players. We we were just all over the shop. We were not in a position. We started the season late. We had an SGM, and it involved ourselves and Stoke Poges as well. I fought tooth and nail to delay our season starting because I was desperate to go into the second division. I basically argued that if Ian Wick were given the treatment, we should have been given the treatment as well. Other clubs like AFC Classics, when they complained about being in the Premier Division, would then drop down 2 divisions instead of 1, and they then won Division 2. And I made an argument about that as well, saying, why were they given an opportunity to develop? And again, why were we penalised and not given an opportunity to develop? And we were never given an answer, but another club was. So a lot of my club's management were looking at it going, what have you done? Why don't they like you? Like, why aren't they giving us an opportunity? And yeah, it all basically snowballed into an SGM. And for anyone that doesn't know what that is, it's called a special general meeting. And after an AGM, which is an annual general meeting where all the clubs get together and they vote on the constitutions and the league and the process and all the rules and the referee fees, we basically objected to everything and said, we're having it. We're really desperate to change our situation. So we had an SGM. The season started in September, and the SGM was in the middle of October that we went to. And we basically had the mercy of our fates at the clubs in the EBFL. And I mean, I wasn't looking forward to it after I saw one of the Brickwell representatives come up to me, and he called me about 3 or 4 names under the sun, and I thought, God, this is going to be a long evening. And largely, though, the clubs actually had our backs. We both had to stand up and give little, like, you know, we had to basically bear our clubs in front of everyone else. We had to basically, you know, justify why we were in this position. So we had to lay everything out on the table for these clubs to like assess, and you know that's quite an uncomfortable thought as well, because other clubs other clubs have never had that. They've never got up onto a stage and basically said, this is what's wrong about my club. No other club's done that. And, you know, we went up there and basically said, we have this issue, we have this issue, we want you to be kind to us. And largely, the vote saw the clubs actually on our side of things. I'm not so sure on your side of things, Darren, but on our side of things, clubs predominantly voted in our favour and said, let's give them a break. Other clubs have been given a break. And then it was actually the league committee who actually had votes as well at this SGM that voted against us, and they wanted to keep the status quo. So we had the club say one thing and the committee said another, and the committee had more power because they had more votes. So we were always in a loose.
I just want to interject one thing there, because obviously we sat together in a committee meeting before that, and if I remember rightly, the committee, we both left with the committee both saying that they will back both our clubs to both stay, us staying in Division 1 and you go into Division 1. So obviously on the night when this thing happened, unbeknown to myself, the committee had a meeting and changed their minds, not telling us. Mm-hmm. And obviously had the same meeting. They said about themselves, they changed their mind and they said they want to keep you into their Prem. Yeah. Neither of us knew this when we turned up for the meeting, because I know that if I had turned up for the meeting, I had known beforehand what happened with the committee, I certainly wouldn't have wanted that meeting to go ahead, and I would have said, right, well, just go to Prem, rather than put it to a vote, and essentially not waste everyone's time. So I think we were slightly railroaded on our behalf. I know similar thing for yourselves, and I know that obviously in fairness, I think you did have a majority of the clubs there were more sympathetic to your situation than ours, which is wasn't an issue of that. But how did you feel when you knew that happened? Because I know how I felt.
I wasn't surprised because of who runs the league committee. I just want to preface, I have nothing but respect for volunteers in grassroots football. I am one. I spend a lot of time actually helping the EBFL. I made their website, I made the crest that you all see on social media. I've helped redesign the league and make sure that it stays intact. But I think I wasn't shocked. I was more shocked that the flip-flopping was constant, and we were on an emotional roller coaster in the WhatsApp groups that the EBFL clubs are involved with, one day it was you're in Div 1, the next is you're in the Prem, the next it's we don't know, and then the next it's you're in Div 1. So eventually I was basically, my hips like a washing machine. I was going around in cycles. I didn't understand what was happening. And if I had known, again, that we were going to be railroaded at this meeting and we were basically going to have a bunch of older, less liberal people who basically say to us, oh, this is football and this is how it is, to a league that is struggling for teams, I would have laid everything bare for all the other clubs and I would have just accepted my fate. But the fact that they made us go through that whole process just to basically stick the finger up us right at the end of the meeting, it's just not good manners, and it's weird. It's not like we're bad people, and I think a lot of football club owners that are trying to do the right things do, as you keep telling me, get tarred with a certain brush, and it's not that whatsoever. I feel like there's two sides of every story, and we were basically just in a really bad position, and and yes, in the mid-October we accepted our position, and as a club we said what we're going to do about it. We have to make a very firm decision very quickly, and then we literally had to get on with it. We had to make a lot of sacrifices just to make sure that the season got going ahead. Just for context as well, we were the only Reading team in the league. There was 10 teams in the division, we were the only Reading-based team, so we were also dealt with the proposition of the most travel of any team in the league, with the smallest squad, and that is a very hard thing to manage when you've got Brickwell away or Windsor away and Singsava away within the first 5 weeks of the season. You're like, oh my god, how are we going to manage that with Ben's squad? And then somehow we managed to get it through.
So, obviously you just hit on something just there. You're a Reading-based team.
Yes. Yeah.
And you play in the Star League.
Yeah.
Obviously that will come with challenges. We've got a few more Reading-based teams now in the league. And how do you think, obviously for the Slough teams like ourselves, we play fairly local on a regular basis. So it kind of doesn't affect us, but you're travelling, for instance, us going out to Reading once in a blue moon, we hate. I know we do. It's a longer journey as such. And got to leave earlier, and as I said, habits are different on those games. You've got to do that pretty much every other week. Have you not thought about going into a Reading league? Also, I know the answer to this, but I just want you to go out and tell everyone why you have chosen being a Slough-based league.
So, for people that don't understand football in the Reading and Thames Valley area, the East Berks as well to an extent, there's two predominant leagues. You've got the East Berkshire League, who play out in Slough, and a few clubs from London, and now you get more teams filtering from Reading. And then you've got the Thames Valley League on the other side of the fence, which is a Step 7 league. They've got 4 divisions and a Prem, very established, older setup. The Thames Valley League is a league that we have, I'll open in a minute, we've applied to it, I think, every single year, not because that we want to, but because of my players have said, if we're in the Thames Valley League, it will be more accessible to our players, it will be more accessible for us to be on the development run. And, so I cater to what my players say. Even though I have a vested interest in the EBFL, I do lean on what my players say, because if my players turn around to me at the end of the day and say, we're not going to play in the EBFL, there's nothing I can do about it. So I do have to do the due diligence as a secretary to make sure that we're in a position to play football. Because if enough people say they're not going to do it, over time, as what I'm in now, people do not want to do it. So we're in a position where we've applied for the Thames Valley League, and basically, because of my past being a Woodley United player, the league is actually run by the Woodley United secretary or the chairman, I don't know which one he is, as well as the Reading City guy. And a lot of football, I think across the board, a lot of football committees that enter new teams, they're quite archaic. I don't want to call them dinosaurs because they're still human beings, but there's a different mindset to where clubs are at. I'm 31 and I have a very progressive outlook on football and how football teams should be run. But when you go through processes with football leagues, it's a lot slower. There's not a lot of communication, and there's a lot of waiting for nothing. and we applied just to try to get in, and every year they've given us a different excuse why we haven't been allowed into the league. And I feel like, I don't know this for sure, but I feel like there's a more nefarious reason why we're not in the league, probably because there's a personal dislike towards the club or the people involved, why we haven't been able to move on or, rightfully go across to another league, whilst other clubs in the East Berks League at the same time have been able to do it. Teams such as AFC Wingfield, South Bucks Phoenix, and the Phoenix Old Boys setup as a whole, and a lot of these clubs in Hambledon, there's been so many that have made the jump and the leap, and we're in such a better position off the pitch and on the pitch, and we're not given the time of day. And I feel, I don't quite know, I haven't quite pinned it on the head. Yeah, so we've obviously, our interest in the long term is to be in a football league that constantly has development, so you can keep going up the ladder. And the East Berkshire League, for us, has just posed nothing but issues with constant travel. And I mean, I don't mind the travel as such, because you've got to do it. And for example, one of the players in my football team is an NFL player as well, plays represented the UK, and he says that he travels all across the country just for one game of American football and then come back. Travel, to be committed, it doesn't matter where you travel. So we're just in a position where we can't get into the Reading League because there's some type of barrier that we haven't quite figured out, because they won't tell us what it is, what is so off-putting about us going into their league and their setup. And on the East Berkshire front, we're struggling because there's such a disparity of our position compared to the other teams. We have to do this constant travel, and for example, if we get a bad referee on a day and we have to travel up to like West London to play a team like Townmead for them to field an ineligible player, and the referee is he's not with it, my players look at that and go, I might sit at home next Saturday. So that's kind of where we're at with it.
Okay. So, I mean, obviously, what you're saying is essentially East Berks are your only option.
Pretty much, yeah.
And in fairness, I think that happens to a lot of teams nowadays that we've got quite a few Reading teams into our league. There seems to be that the Thames Valley League are quite full up with leagues at this moment in time. They're fairly successful. However, we look across to East Berkshire League, and we've got only 2 leagues now, which are running, I think, 28 teams currently. There's definitely a difference between the 2 leagues as such. So you're part of the East Berks League. You've been part of that now for a few years. You've gone in after a difficult season last year. Start to the season last year, you kind of got it together, and you've done ever so well. You actually managed to go and win yourself a cup.
Yeah.
Congratulations on that. Well done. Obviously, teams are now looking, thinking, well, what the hell will the start about? I'll imagine, because they're thinking, what's all the commotion about? You just won yourself a cup. What's happened? And surely now you should go strength to strength. You know you're going to be in the Prem. You've won a cup. It should be happy days now, shouldn't it?
It's not how football works.
Fair enough. I know that.
It's not how football works. So obviously, from an outsider's point of view, we should have been in a position to go from strength to strength. But sometimes you get a bad hand in life. And I think sometimes, I am nothing but focused. I spend all of my free time. I've sacrificed my personal and social life to make sure that this club can be a success. And I've had a lot of people just tell me, a lot of smart people tell me, sometimes you just get a bad hand. The recruitment drive this summer has been very good. We have brought in a load of really young, really talented, really nice guys, and we've got in a lot of new players and tightened up our structure as such to what we had last year, because at the end of the season, we've never been in a position where we've had to battle a 60-man squad for a cup final. Because in the RSSL, we just basically said, all right, the whole squad can get kit on, and there wasn't a sub limit, so you could just come on and off as you please. But when we had the cup final, we lost about 5 players within a day because they weren't in the squad. And we're talking about players that were only making themselves committed maybe 1 or 2 weeks before the final, thinking, I might be able to sneak in. And then when I said to the lads, you know, we're going to play the players that have been playing, and we're going to play the players that have been committed to us, then everyone that wasn't like a lot of the large bulk of the squad players just said, "Oh, not enough." So we lost a lot of that. We had graduates that we knew were leaving, and yeah, it just hasn't happened quickly enough, and everything. So we're in a position now where we were looking at it, and we've got one very strong squad for a day, and we were trying to look at how to manage 2 days of football. But because of the types of players we have in, who are all really nice, we haven't yet been able to get the commitment that we need to be able to do the sustained travel to Slough, to be able to manage financially the increased referee costs in the league, to manage some of the increased expectations as well. So the last thing we wanted to do was to take batterings for 2 months in the league, and then we sack it off anyway, and then we basically had a financial penalty for 2 or 3 months.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we were at. So yeah, so sometimes we get a bad hand, and we've accepted that largely. I mean, internally, I would never accept it, but because, you know, I always want to be involved and doing more. But yeah, we're in a process where, you know, my club captain Vince said to me, "This is the year now where you basically rebuild. You go again next year, and you put in some firmer foundations so something like this never happens again." And if the sacrifice of that is potentially not being in the East Berks League in the long term, then I think we maybe have to go that route.
Okay. So. I know that you sent out communication to the league. I've seen those communications. And what's happened from those communications? Have you heard anything back to this day, first of all, on that?
Yeah, so I'm just going to be dreadfully honest. I think that's the only way.
But
yeah, of course, yeah. Not just for the sake of the content, but yeah, I feel like I just have to be dreadfully honest because, you know, you only live one life. So yeah, basically, the guys that run the East Berkshire League have been getting a monthly email from me, basically saying where we're at. I've kind of like pre-warned them that we're going to have a few struggles, and I was half anticipating that they were going to look at us and communicate with me and say exactly where we were. Maybe there was going to be some allowance for our position and where we're at. Obviously, the league didn't want to communicate with me. The only person that did was Alan and yourself. They just asked him what's up, is there anything I can do to help? But largely, the league left us on red for 3-4 months. And then at the AGM, without any communication, I tried to speak to them, nothing happens. They just keep us where we were. And I kind of pre-warned them saying, you might need to review our position in the league prior to the AGM, because obviously I had sent out a very detailed list of who we've lost, the types of players we've got in. All of the new players that we've recruited are between 17 and 21 years old. So it's a different breed of player that is probably more accustomed to a Division 1 team than it is a Premier Division team. And then we've got a few experienced players like myself that can bolster that up. But yeah.
So obviously, you're doing that. I've seen those communications, and they're well forced out and well written, to be quite honest. You've done that the previous year with very little or no response. So to continue doing that was actually quite a brave thing to do, in fairness. And I thought, okay, fair play to you. You're consistent. I know that, to be quite honest. That was good news. But obviously, again, I know the answer to this, but the communication back from the league, how do you feel that happened?
So basically, throughout this whole process, we got to the point most recently where the communication from the league has only been filtering in after the AGM that we had in late August, a couple of weeks before the start of the season. The league, so obviously, unfortunately, the league lost Robin Warman over the summer, which is a massive loss to the league, especially for Slough football in general. And since then, Brian Bowyer, who's been involved in the football region for ages, he runs the Maidenhead and North Oakingham Cup. He's always been part of the EBFL committee. He was at the meeting when I first turned up. So I feel like the league took it as a natural step to put him in place. So he has been running point on a lot of the communications with the league. And Brian is an old school football guy, very much so. I mean, I like Brian, he's a nice guy. He's a really nice guy. I can talk about football with him all day long. But the communication back from the league has been not only non-existent, but when I've been speaking with Brian and Gary, the secretary that run the league, it's just been back and forth. It feels like the committee are all over the place with communicating with us. They don't know exactly what to say. There's mixed signals. And then, for example, so at the moment, we're definitely out. There's no stuff. I don't know how we're going to get back up and running now, purely because of the way that the league have communicated with us. It's stopped us reaching out and creating olive branches with other teams and other people in the Slough area to be in a position to play, and the communication has been nothing. And then all of a sudden we were getting lots of phone calls, but they weren't phone calls that were, like you said, that we needed help. It wasn't a phone call to say, all right, what do you need and how do we help? Do you have a time frame in mind? It wasn't that. It was a conversation of, that I'm going to throw the book at you and say you knew what was coming, you can't fulfill our promises to be in the league. And yes, the leagues need rules, they need to be, they need to stick to what they know is true. But at the same time, the East Berks League is in a very unique position because you get a lot of new clubs that are newly formed that do not have a lot of help from the county FA. They do not have a lot of help from other people. They're largely unfunded and they need help from teams. So there has to be a compromise. And the communication I've got hasn't been any of the sort. It's basically been, we're going to throw the book at you. We're going to tell you that our way is the only way, and that's it. And then pretty much we've just been left in the lurches. And the communication with Brian Bowyer has actually been me trying to plead to stay in the league, to try to force any avenue to compete in competitive football in the East Berkshire League. And the response has pretty much been, oh well, we're going to be really sad to leave you, but oh well, see you later, bye. That's literally been the form of communication that we've got. There's been no care or attention to keep us in the league one bit from a lot of these guys that are running it. So we're left in a position where, other clubs might have been in the past, but they're feeling unwanted, they don't know what to do. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's great.
So, obviously we're here Saturday, 24th of September, and not to put too hard a point that you are not my Saturday football team anymore.
No.
Okay. However, and this is, I think, will be the crux of the matter. I believe probably about a week ago, or not even that many days ago, you were in a position to actually stay in the league.
Yes, we were.
And you were told, essentially, we don't want you now.
Basically.
So, obviously, I'm not going to ask how you feel about that, because I can see how you feel about that. But how did that process come about? I mean, I think most clubs in our league will be pretty disappointed when they see you leave. Mm-hmm. But I think they'll be more disappointed to know that you, as a football club, could be playing football games. Maybe as early as this week, but certainly from next week onwards. Yeah, which is next week.
Yeah.
You could be putting out a side every week to fulfil the fixtures for the rest of the season.
Yeah.
How do you think other football clubs are going to feel about that? Do you think they know the whole story? And if they don't, I think it's time to tell them.
Yeah, so first of all, I think football moves on quite quickly. So in life, things move on quite quickly. So this will be brushed under the rug as it is, and people will move on in life. So I don't expect people to have a firm attachment to it. There'll be obviously a bit of disappointment. But just for people that didn't know, an option did come up. I'm not going to mention the guys involved because I don't want to bring their names into it, but we had a couple of really lovely guys that reached out. It was actually Gary, the secretary of the EBFL, that gave me this guy's telephone number, and he was like, oh, reach out. There's a whole bunch of players that want to play football in Slough in the league, and there was a couple of teams that potentially folding, and we had a pool of players available basically. And I was very, very, very close, and it nearly happened that we had arranged for basically a hype train Slough team to basically form and to stay in the league.
So let's touch that. So that's something quite big there. You essentially just said hype train Slough team.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. So that suggests that you're not hype training for Reading anymore. You are moving everything over to being Slough.
Yeah.
You have a team of players and a pool of players who are ready to play football.
Yeah.
Potentially from this week, well, most likely next weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not doing ahead of that because you were told you were not wanted.
Basically, yeah. So, so we were in the process of potentially uprooting our Saturday team and plonking it at Slough. We had actually found 2 or 3 pitches. We were well set to go. The only things that we had to figure out were some of the internal logistics things, because we were going to get a couple of players to come up from Reading, and we were going to slowly integrate it completely in at Slough. But yeah, it was pretty much done. And all we were waiting for was confirmation from the league that we were going to be given enough time to make sure that we could see it across the line. Bear in mind, we didn't start our season until the last week of October last year, and we're still in September now. There's less teams in the Premier League, so there would be less fixtures. So we know for a fact that we could have got all of our fixtures done and dusted. We won in the President's Cup because we're not a Div 1 team now, so obviously we couldn't defend that. So we had time on our side, and we still do. To this day, we still have time to do it. So we were pretty much, I was going to sell out the soul of my brand for a year to keep a team in the league. It was going to be largely a group of people that hadn't met. I was taking a chance on people, but they were very nice people, and I kind of had a very good vibe about them and a good inkling. We were pretty much ready to go. And I mean, from this recording in a month's time, I'm still hoping that we may be in a position to do this or to get going again. But obviously, the more time that passes, the less likely it's going to happen. We were pretty much going to uproot and move. We were going to do a whole restructure and have a team in Reading on Sundays and a team in Slough on Saturdays. And the league basically the lack of communication to me was, I said that we just need a bit of time. Here's a proposed date that we want to start. Here's a proposed date, and here's the names involved, and we're ready to go. We just need to sign the dotted line on a new high pitch, and we were pretty much there. And Brian, in particular, here basically told me that we had already had enough time. We had already been in a position to know the rules, and that the league starts on the 3rd of September. And if you can't live up to that, then I'm sorry, but we hate to see you leave, but it's time to go, to quote AFTV. But yeah, so we were pretty much told in no uncertain terms that by one person that we pretty much, by Brian Bowyer, the president of the league. He was, Gary's been in Canada for 3 weeks, and he's let Brian run all the roost as such to say. But yeah, so we've been in a position now where we've been messed about, where we've been told you can, you can't, you can, you can't, similar to what we had last year, to the point now where the guys that I was dealing with have been put off because they don't want to deal with the uncertainty of it, and they've just gone dark on it. And I do not blame them, because every time I go back to them and I say, yes, this is great, we're moving along, everything's going great, the league will then communicate with me saying, hold on a minute, and it's just got to the point now where now I'm visibly skittish about starting it up again, because I don't want the same thing to happen. I don't want to go down the route again where we're pretty much there, and I'm forming a new relationship with a whole bunch of new players, and then all of a sudden I have one person call me up and say, oh, no, it's not going to happen. Then, as soon as I had that phone call with Brian in the EBFL WhatsApp group, Rob Stevens, about a communication, without speaking to Brian, saying, Hype Train's games are going to be postponed, and we hope that they're going to be able to start playing very soon. And that contradicted what I was told 5 minutes ago on the telephone, which is no is a no, and everything. And yes, it will be disappointing, because a lot of the teams in the league want to play games. We're 2 extra games. We're an established club now in the league, and we were basically told no uncertain terms. I was told directly that sorting out a new merger for a football club and sorting out an entire new club setup would take a 20-minute phone call. It'd be done in 20 minutes over the phone. That's in word for word what I was told by Brian. That it would be 20 minutes, done and dusted, easy peasy. Like running a football club is just clicking a finger and all of a sudden, oh, there we go, new pitch, new management, new structure, new everything in place. Like football clubs start up overnight, like, you know, they're a bit of IKEA furniture that they can just be assembled in an hour. It's not like that in football. And all I asked was for a bit more time to get the wheels in motion. And I've been pretty much told by a very grumpy elderly gentleman, oh, well, how long is that going to be? You're going to mess us about even more. To the point that I basically said, oh, I'm done, I'm done. I can't deal with that stress every week. So
obviously, yeah, you've had a conversation with Brian. Brian basically said they ran out of time. Didn't need to be ready on the 3rd of September.
Yeah.
But this is conversations that we're having after the 3rd of September.
Yeah.
So kind of contradicts everything anyway. But that aside, I mean, obviously, you're saying about Rob Stevens putting out a message out saying it looks like everything's cool and you're going to be coming back. Just need a couple of weeks, essentially. So I'll change the fixtures for you. Also, you get 2 free weekends, which you should use, which will mean really only one weekend where you would have needed help on before starting up again. Obviously, you probably feel, well, I know you feel slightly aggrieved about that. What could, I mean, how could it have been different? I mean, going back to the beginning of this, I mean, obviously, you know, I know the struggles that you had, I know why you've had struggles as such, but, you know, what do you think a committee or people who run a league could do? You know, and essentially, why should they help you? I mean, obviously, the obvious answer is to keep you in the league, but you know, they saw this last year to some degree. They probably thought we left it alone and you can't come good, despite all the hassles. But I know it wasn't quite like that. But do you think that's how they saw it? Thought, okay, you all come through. Don't worry. This is all of it. Game played by Rob because he wants to go down.
I don't think it was that much. I feel like to some of the, I'm just going to say how it is. I feel like some of the antiquated people in the committee saw me as a bothersome. They saw me as somebody that would just cause them 5 minutes of hassle a week. They saw me as somebody that was obviously trying to fight, and they don't have enough energy to fight it. And they wanted to see, they would rather, it's the easier thing to see the back of somebody who is causing them what for them on their side of the fence would be some type of a disturbance that would cause in a committee group some type of like heated debate or reaction. So some of these elderly guys are like, oh, screw it, we don't need them. We don't need them. Let's get rid of them. We don't need it. We don't need this hassle. Let's just move on. Let's just move on and have a nice time with things. And I feel like that's the mindset for sure that they've had coming into this. And I feel like, to answer the question, I feel like what a committee can do, first of all, and I've been saying this for years, ever since I started, football needs younger representation at the table, for sure. When I came to the first meeting for the EBFL, I think there was Chris who does all the results. He's in his 30s. And Rob Stevens is in his 30s as well. Everyone else, including yourself, mate, are a little bit over the hill, you know, in terms of age. You know, they can't play anymore. They don't go to football games. They're all associated with their own clubs. They're not connected to football in the area. So they're ruling a kingdom without knowing their people. They don't go to games. They're not in tune with football in the area. You know, you can argue that they're not fit for purpose in one way because they're not aligned with how the clubs view. The people that are the people that do it week to week. The people like me and the people like you that would raise issues. Well, not raise issues, but we would raise saying, okay, this has come up this week. This has come up that week. This is all stuff that the league, without us, would have gone all over their heads because they don't go to games. They're not informed. And largely, there's a few committee members this year that are going to games, and it's a lot better. They kind of see it a lot more, and it's improved. But largely, I feel like committees need younger representation, be it forced, be it be it voluntary. I feel like there needs to be younger voices that are helping to make decisions and curb what I believe is older, archaic views on how football should be run.
Okay.
So yeah.
Obviously, I'm not going to disagree with what you're saying, because one of the reasons when I joined the committee a couple of years ago now was all I kept hearing was the committee should be doing this, the committee should be doing that, and I'm of the views that you can't keep stating something you don't know anything about. So I need to find out for myself. So I asked to join committee meetings. Gary invited me along, and one of the first things that struck me was that I was probably the youngest one there. Now, I'm in my mid-50s, so therefore we're talking someone who's potentially, when I stopped playing when I was 43, so I'm 10 years on playing at that point in time. Most of you guys who are playing are in your 20s, so essentially if the youngest person in the committee was in his mid-50s, there's 30 years difference between us and our 40s and such like.
That's what it was when I come to that meeting. Me and Sam were 30 years younger than anyone in there, at least.
Okay. So obviously you recognise that, and fair play to you, you did join in, you did some bits and pieces, and as you've been pointing out, rightly so, and credit to you for doing this, it looks fantastic. One of the first things you did was set up a new crest for the committee. You got the Twitter going again, you got the Instagram on its way, you completed a website for them, which looks great and is used a lot more than ever been beforehand. So, you know, you come in with new ideas, you essentially were the second team to start filming their football matches after ourselves, but you brought a new idea towards that, and you showed them the video camera, which was fantastic. We were doing it in a different way. No one's better than the other, but it's basically we're both doing it, and I think between ourselves, you know, in terms of social media, we started moving things forward. You then got things like John, who come up with the showcase games. I mean, that's probably an idea which I myself broached a couple of years beforehand as something for the COVID game, which would quite stuff that happened with in the end. But John kind of took that on and such like. And yeah, this season I know John's really disappointed that the showcase game's not happened. I know that it's disappointing to see that you guys are obviously not going to be involved in it. So I know we wouldn't have played you. You know, what can they do? I mean, obviously there's a bunch of guys, however old they are. I mean, you can't make people younger join in the committee, but you know that the big issue is doing the committee. Do you think that teams need to take responsibility for your loss as a football team as much as the committee does? Because there's not young enough voices. We're all in a situation. There's people like Gary Wade out there. I'm not putting this on you, Gary, sorry. But there's Gary, there's Luke, there's Colin, there's John, there's plenty of others, Jordan out there who are good voices in football, but don't want to get involved in the committee side. They do a lot of work for their own clubs, by the way, we all do. But it just needs that on committee. You think that's the answer to these guys need to get involved?
There's a few things that the league can do that can lean on their experience. First and foremost, one thing that we're talking about learning experiences. Last year when we joined the Sunday League, so they were running monthly committee meetings, so new teams had to attend by default. So Sam, bless him, went to every single Thursday night meeting because I play and train on Thursdays with another, with a more casual setup. And Sam, bless him, went to every meeting, and they make the new teams go so that they understand the culture of the league, they understand any of the issues, and that they can have an input if they would like. And what it does is that it forces new clubs in particular to form a bond and a loyalty with the league, and it then promotes these clubs being more integrated. I believe that the EBFL would benefit from doing a similar thing where they could have monthly committee meetings and have select teams go each month. So let's say there's 8 odd clubs in the league. Each month you will have 4 that have to mandatory turn up, and they give their insights and their opinions to the league about what they can do to help improve the league, to help retain the clubs, to hear out what the clubs have as issues. That is the biggest thing that the league doesn't have. They do not talk to clubs about what our struggles are. And the EBFL is in a very different position from the Thames Valley League. So I feel like I'd probably come across something negative on Brian here. Brian has a mindset of the Thames Valley League. It's more of an established, old school setup. You fall in the rules, and if you fall out of the rules, you're out of the league. It's a very simple setup. In the East Berks League, you're dealing with juvenile teams. That, I mean that as in they're new, they're brand new. They've got a new coat of paint on from old clubs, and you have to embed them before. You have to walk before you run in any form of life. And these clubs need more direction because they don't know how leagues work. They don't know how clubs work. Like the first thing, like for example, the AGN that we had, there was a team that ended up pulling out of the league. And every time a question got brought up, because they weren't very savvy at a meeting, they were questioning everything in a really negative way. And it's because they don't understand how it works. So these clubs need, I think there needs to be like a bridge to acclimatise new clubs into the divisions, and then how you build from that year on year. So there needs to be a development plan for the league where they can basically say, okay, when a new team joins, this is their expectations, their responsibilities, and then we can hold monthly committee meetings and invite X amount of clubs to talk about issues so that the league committee know exactly what the issues are, so that then, even if they can't help, they're in a position to understand more, so that then you don't have conversations like I had with Brian, which is, I don't understand and I don't want to understand what's going on. And that's kind of how you can bridge a gap between a league that doesn't know its clubs and the clubs that need just to vent some of their frustrations out with the league, because you do find teething pains, especially with new clubs. The EBFL has so many new clubs every year because we're a runoff of the Thames Valley teams that come in. So, for example, the new Reading teams that are coming in this year, the new there's a few other teams as well. Well, there's barely any from Slough now. I don't think they're joined. They're all from Reading. They're all from Reading and outside that come in, and they need their hands held. There needs to be club representatives that can communicate with new clubs. I think there should be a committee member that just deals with new clubs. Here's the expectations, here's the rules. Like, I don't know if the secretary Gary can assign this to somebody else, but maybe like a liaison for new clubs. This would really benefit the league, because then they're less inclined to think the league don't care. Let's find another league. Oh, there's the Thames Valley, let's try to get in there. Communication is the key of everything in life. You don't communicate with your girlfriend, you break up. You don't communicate with your football team, they let you go. It's the part and parcel of life that you need. So that's kind of some of what they need to do. But it just depends on how engaged the committee are with how they can help clubs. Like, for example, there's a few funds available to grassroots football clubs that we never hear about because it's never communicated to us. And sometimes you've got it's sometimes like football funding is like finding a needle in a haystack. There's all of this stuff available from the county FA, but you never hear about it ever. And this is where the league can tighten itself up and everything to help clubs. So then, when next summer, like let's say another club that's not hype training might be in this exact same position, the league can learn and be, okay, we've learned and this is how we can be in a position, even if it's to hear you out and to give you like an extension or to like start playing, instead of what the current formula is, which is if you don't meet an X deadline, you're gone, which is obviously not ideal when you're dealing with more fragile clubs that need more time and support from the league.
Yeah, good. Look, I want to start wrapping this up now.
Yeah,
okay. The last question I want to ask you is, obviously Sundays seem to be going okay. What's the future or is there a future for State Liverpool for hype training?
Yeah, so we're planning on, so behind the scenes, me and my committee are basically putting in steps to make sure that we can return to Saturday football ASAP. But we're only going to do it when we know that we've got the correct foundations in place, so we're not in a similar position this year where we're potentially having to rely on coming up to Slough. Not that's a bad thing, but we ideally want to have our roots in Reading, and we are planning. But as is like the one thing that more established clubs know is that football club development doesn't happen overnight. It's a very slow process.
Yeah.
It's not, you don't get anything done easily in football. Nothing happens overnight. everything takes months. If anything good takes a long time in football, and we both know that. So we're at the start of the process now where we're looking to build more concrete foundations above our feet so that we're not in the same position. So if it's not this year and it's not next year, it'll be the year after, but hopefully we're back next year. And hopefully we can still compete in some of the outside cups this year because we're still keen, still interested.
Okay.
Yeah, apart from that, the future's bright. It's just, you learn. Like, the one parting message is if the club is ever in this position, to never give up. There's always another way. If you ever have to take a loss, you have to just take a loss and rebuild, but you can rebuild better next time. And yeah, that's probably my planning message. Apart from that, thank you for obviously having me on. So it's probably been a long one. And, that's my voice around the podcast. So,
I want to thank you all for today. It's been a real pleasure having you, mate. I know you're paying what's happened over the last couple of weeks, but I know that this is not the last that we'll see of you. Certainly might be the last to see you on this channel and this podcast, I think. But yeah, once again, guys, just want to thank you all for listening in. I want to thank our sponsors as well. See some of them in the background. Yeah, tune in, hopefully subscribe and like, and see you next week.
Ice in my veins, I've been driving this train. Years in this lane, there's no stopping this flame. Cause I came to the game and I changed it to play how I like, rearranged it to my own domain. Yeah, I got what it takes, made lots of mistakes, taking shots, skipping breaks, feeling lost.